Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm going to be talking about a new yearly challenge that I'm going to do on this channel. So this is going to be the Around the World in 12 non-fiction challenge, and the idea is basically I read a fair number of history books and non-fiction books, but there definitely is a focus quite accidentally on British or US history, just because it's something that being from the UK myself, I tend to prioritise stuff from home turf, and then I think the US, because it's such a sort of global superpower, quite often just creeps up, and so many booktubers are from the US, so again you get kind of a skewing, a favouritism for that kind of an area. But actually I've got loads of great history books on my TBR that are from different countries, and I really wanted to make a conscious effort to try and read from a wider range of countries and kind of patch in some of my history and sort of general world events knowledge about the rest of the world. I do know a fair amount generally, but I think it kind of gets filled in from like micro histories on different topics. Like I've read ones on like fabric or COD or board games that like will often journey across the globe, but I don't have a great like linear kind of history on particular countries or in sort of particular moments of turmoil from that country, and I wanted to use this as an opportunity to try and start to fill in some of those gaps and really sort of focus my reading in. So I have 12 books, funnily enough. 6 of them I already own, 6 of them are on my want to read list on Goodreads, which again, this will hopefully help me focus on actually working through my want to reads on Goodreads, because it can be a list that languishes and I never make a real dent into. And why am I not starting this in 2024? Because life is short and you should start yearly challenges whenever you want, because January is a fairly arbitrary deadline. So we're starting in October and it will be perfectly in time for Non-Fiction November, so fuck it. You're welcome to join if you want. It doesn't have a hashtag, it doesn't have anything meaningful. It's just me and 12 books, yeah? So let's talk about the books. One that I've never mentioned on this channel because I only bought it a couple of weeks ago is The Darkness Echoing by Gillian O'Brien. This is Ireland's Places of Famine, Death and Rebellion, and this is kind of the book that has really sparked this idea for me. So I have a work colleague who is Irish, and she quite often mentions Irish history, and I realised that my knowledge is patchy at best, and I really wanted to find something that would help fill the gaps for me, that wasn't specifically about like the potato famine or like Bloody Sunday, and was a bit more of a kind of broad look at it. So this book is focused on different heritage sites and what they mean for Irish history in general. So I'm hoping it's going to be a really nice like broad sweep through the country's kind of history, going back quite far and then bringing it up a bit more to modern day, and was kind of the breadth that I was looking for from it. So this is definitely going to be one that I'm going to try and get to fairly soon. I'm thinking there's probably going to be a non-fiction November prompt for it, and then I'll be able to talk meaningfully with Kate in the staff room about Irish history, and that's always fun. One that has been on my shelf for bloody years now is In Monteparnasse by Sue Rowe. This is the emergence of surrealism in Paris from Duchamp to Dali. I have read quite a lot about art history in general, and this is obviously focused on France and Paris in a particular time period. Sue Rowe has a couple of books like this which are picking a particular area, quite often in France. France was big for art history for quite a few years, and kind of looking at the artists in that area and how they came together and ended up influencing each other. I actually started this for Non-Fiction November I think 2 or 3 years ago now, and then basically had to bail because it was when I was starting to study and really didn't have the mental energy for it. So I think it might be time I finally tick this one off my list. And I love art history. I think it's such a fun, fascinating area and has such quirky characters in it. So this is definitely high on my list to get to. A bit of a chonker that is going to take me a little while, but that's probably a good reason to put it on this TBR because I'm hella intimidated about it, is St. Petersburg by Jonathan Miles. This is 3 Centuries of Murderous Desire. The cover is unbelievably gorgeous, and it is looking at the city of St. Petersburg, which is in Russia, and the way that it has kind of been a landmark site for a lot of different moments of turmoil in Russian history. Russia is probably one of the few areas that I have read a semi-decent amount about in the past. I read a big chunky book a couple of years ago called The Romanovs, which was a really interesting look at the Romanov family and the lineage of that, who were the rulers, the monarchy of Russia for so long, like a good couple of centuries. So this is sort of the next huge chunky book on Russia that I have to get to. I don't know why Russia in particular, I seem to just buy these absolute doorstop books, I might look into this one for audiobook. I think it would be a good way of getting through it, but it will be a really interesting look at a city that has had a lot of different names and a lot of different focuses in Russian history. Branching out a little bit, we also have The Medici by Paul Strathern. This is Godfathers of the Renaissance, and the Medici were basically like the powerhouse mobster family of the Italian Renaissance. So yeah, I've owned this book for a while. I would really love to know more about them. They weren't quite royalty as such, but they were like a powerful family when Italy was still divided up into states a lot more. And again, they are the kind of family that like I have a cursory knowledge of them based on other books that I've read where they've kind of appeared. When I was a kid, I read a book series, the Stravaganza series, I will link it down below, that was based in a parallel universe of Italy that had a big major mob family that were called the Decimi rather than the Medici, but that were based incredibly closely on the Medici. So I would really like to know now, reading this book, what was real and what wasn't from that like random fantasy YA book series that I read 20 years ago. So this one I think will be really good, and they have a lot of interactions with a lot of big names again in art history and Italian art, which is something that I would love to know a bit more about, because a lot of my art history knowledge is modern art, so I would like to fill in some gaps that I have for a lot more kind of classical art. One that you saw quite recently, because it wasn't a book haul, was The Witches, Salem 1692, A History. So yes, this is a book about US history, and yes, I did say at the beginning of this video that I've read a lot more about the US, and I have, in comparison to like some other areas, but I really haven't read that much in comparison to how much I read about British history, so I don't feel guilty putting this on. And the witch trials are something that, again, I know a lot about how we handled it in the UK. I've read a couple of books specifically focused on it in the UK, like with James I and people like that, but Salem is something that I don't know much actual fact about. I just know a lot of sort of pop culture references to burning women at the stakes and Salem being a bad area, and lots of crappy B-movie horror movies that are based in Massachusetts. So I am really psyched to get to this one. I've heard mixed things from people online, but my thought is this might be October's pick because, you know, it's Halloween and spooky, and why the hell not? And the last book on the physical TBR is France, A History from Gaul to De Gaulle by Julius Norwich. And this one, again, I picked up fairly recently, and this should just be a nice broad sweeping look at French history, which really what I'm looking for from this series is a lot of broad sweeping looks at a country's history. So this one I think will be perfect. I know I already have a book in France on the list. We're looking at Paris, but that is such a like micro zoomed in look at Paris in a very particular era, whereas this is like broad sweeping country looks. And France I thought was a good one because Britain and France have interacted a lot in the past, and again, I know bits, like I watched Rain, I know bits, but let's fill in the gaps a bit more. I've read The Count of Monte Cristo, I know about Napoleon, kind of. So yeah, we need to really solidify this. Okay, now we're going to try and whistle through some of the 6 books that I have that I want to try and get to, but I don't physically own yet. I have them all on my laptop on Goodreads, so you can enjoy the like lovely backlit underglow that we now have from my laptop. The first one is City on Fire, The Fight for Hong Kong by Antony Dapiran. This is about the riots in 2019. I know nothing about them. I don't even remember there being riots in 2019. Anybody else find that their brain has just wiped 2018, 2019 from their mind? Like 2020's COVID catastrophe just completely has like negated everything that happened a couple of years before then. It is wild. My brain really struggles to remember what the hell was going on in that time period. But yeah, so I know nothing, and I know very, very little about Chinese history in general, so I think this is kind of a no-brainer to really start to fill in some gaps, because oh damn, we need to. The next one is Cities and Canopies, Trees in Indian Cities by Harini, Nagendra and Seema Mandoli. This is a look at the sort of interaction between trees and cities and how we kind of do planting. A lot of it is more about environmental science, but it's also going to look at India and Indian culture and its connections with plants. And it says that there's lots of particular plants that have got a lot of like historical heritage to India. So I am intrigued by this. I think it's gonna be a really fun look at a country that again I know very little about. I have plenty of books on my shelf about like Britain fucking over all these countries. We've got like Empire Land and a few other ones, and my intention is to read them as well, so that is a good way of patching in my knowledge of the world. But I wanted some stuff that was really like focused just on those countries rather than the various ways that the British society has completely balls them up, and British monarchy. But yeah, so this one looked intriguing. Then I have Black Wave, Saudi Arabia, Iran and the 40-year rivalry that unraveled culture, religion and collective memory in the Middle East. Holy crap, that is a long subtitle. This is by Kim Ghattas. So again, a rivalry that I don't know much about, and is something that I would like to know more about. It says that the rivalry was born in the sparks of the 1979 Iranian Revolution. I know a little bit about that. I've read Persepolis. I think that covers that part of it. But I definitely need to patch in more history from this part of the world in general. So again, this felt like a real no-brainer. We're gonna go back a bit more ancient now. Like, I've read books on the Vikings, I've read books on the Celts, but let's talk about Egypt, and ancient Egypt specifically. And this is When Women Ruled the World, 6 Queens of Egypt by Cooney. And this is just 6 remarkable female pharaohs, which is very hard to say fast. And yeah, I can't wait to get to this one. It's quite a big book. I think this is going to be almost like a St. Petersburg style book, very chunky, but I've heard only good things. A couple of people have reviewed it on BookTube recently, and said that it was really good. And I wanted to throw in like a proper ancient history one for me in here as well, because it is definitely an area that I really enjoy. And Egypt is something that, ancient Egypt I know a little bit about, but again, a lot of it is just like referencing stuff that you learned as a kid because you really loved the movie The Mummy and you thought Brendan Fraser was fit. So it would be good to actually patch in some genuine information here. Then I have The Reef, A Passionate History by Iain McCalman. This is looking at the Great Barrier Reef, and it is the history of the Great Barrier Reef in 12 extraordinary tales. So I think again it's going to go back and then move it all the way through to modern day. I thought it'd be a fun way of looking at sort of Australian history. It's such a landmark part of it, and it was also going to be a nice way to include some more like natural science, natural history, environmental stuff in there as well, because I don't just like reading history books, and I like it when we can get this kind of multidisciplinary book. So I think that this one will be really interesting, and the coral reefs are so cool. So again, a bit of a no-brainer. And then the last one is an absolute powerhouse, real like heavy hitting name in history writing, and that is Silk Roads by Peter Frankopan. This is a look at the Silk Road and the way that it helped to generate commerce and sort of connected the East and the West. This one is a beast. Goodreads informs me it's 636 pages. It is the kind of book that has been on my want to read for years. It's always out on Waterstone's Face Out. It is such a like well-known one. I've listened to so many podcasts where this guy has spoken. So again, I think it's time that I start like actually reading the book and filling in a big chunk of that history for me. So there we have it. This is the new challenge that I'm doing, and let me know what you think. If you have any particular recommendations for other countries and sort of history books from those particular countries, or even just like major historical events that you're like, you should try and find a book about that, do let me know. It is my intention to release a recommendations video for books about world history that I have read before, that are books that are basically just not based in Britain, and also to release a video talking about British history and some of my favourite books about British history, because I have read a lot in that area. So yeah, so that's it from me. Have a wonderful reading week, and I'll chat to you soon. Oh, can't wave, I've got the laptop.